Whenever I hear stories of people traveling to foreign destinations, what they share is most often what they saw. And what they saw is commonly landmarks and buildings that define the place they went to. Castles, bridges, churches, temples, restaurants, rivers, waterfalls, government buildings, sites of historic events. All of these places are truly fascinating. Even listening to the stories are fascinating. The thing I wonder about the most is, when you travel, how much do you learn, experience, and see of the people who live there? I assume most popular tourist destinations also have a tourist agenda. Places where everyone who goes visits, and that is different from where local residents go. And in speaking with people who travel, there is that magic encounter that people search for, where you see the attractions that are famous, but you also cross over into that intersection of the local scene. Don't get me wrong, I can't imagine traveling to France and not visiting the Louvre or going to Versailles. I can't imagine going to Egypt and not going to the pyramids, or London and going to the Tower of London, or 1,000 other different sites that are there in those locations. But people, seeing people, and getting to know and really know the local community, how often does anyone really get to do that when traveling? When we led tours of New York City, everyone always had a checklist of all the places that they wanted to go see. And the funniest one that just seems so dated right now and is dated right now is most people that came to this New York City wanted to go to Macy's department store. And we would always sit there and go, why do you want to go to that? It's a department store. It's like every department store you have at home. That's not worth the time. We told people the best way to experience New York was to walk the streets, to stop at random places along the way that appeared unique. Then you really got to talk to people, and New Yorkers were always eager to talk. Sometimes they were not as eager to stop, but there was a certain discomfort about walking around New York City, though, for people. And I imagine this is true of every large city around the world. When you walk away from tourist spots, you're forced to see all the things you didn't really want to see. Poverty, homelessness, probably drug trafficking of some level. You see the people that stand on street corners panhandling for change, those people that do the same thing at your home you can drive by, but here in person, they clam onto you and you can't get away. People in New York City was at a colossal amount of garbage that just seemed to be on every single street corner. It was just hard to get away from. We always told people that everything you see in New York City happens in your hometown, in your own hometown, no matter how small. It just here, you're forced to look at it. At home, you've trained your eyes not to see things. To prove my point, I once took a group of kids from West St. Paul to New York City on a mission trip. On our trip, all the kids got used to and really enjoyed riding mass transit, being on the subway station. It was just so fun and liberating for them. So when we got home, our youth group activity one afternoon was to ride public transportation. So we got on a bus in Robert Street in West St. Paul. We took the bus into downtown St. Paul. We got on the Green Line. We took the Green Line to the U.S. Bank Stadium. At the time, at the Gold Medal Park down there, there was an ice cream store. So we got ice cream cones. That's all we did. We traveled to the ice cream store, got the ice cream, and headed home. Let's just say the youth saw a whole different world that day. Let's just say Pastor Eric saw a whole different world that day too. Everything they saw riding public transportation, though, they could have seen that in West St. Paul, and they could have seen it in Elkin if their eyes had been open to see it. Today, we read an excerpt of a larger story of Jesus healing a blind man. And the entire story of the healing actually begins in chapter 9, verse 1, and doesn't really end till chapter 10, verse 21. There's too much to digest in one morning, in one setting, for us to listen to the whole thing. Well, most importantly, the second line in the reading is a bombshell question that sets everyone else, and we did not read it this morning. Jesus sees a blind man, and his disciples ask, who sinned, this man or his parents? If we read those lines, we lose the rest of the story. We get so caught up in that question and the judgment of that question that we forget to hear anything else. Jesus answers that question in one simple sentence, neither he nor his parents, and then moves on. But that question is so falsely embedded into our souls that it makes us blind and deaf to what is taking place in this story. So I left it out of the reading. But then I mentioned it here, so I blew that one. Without it, we get to the greater point. Jesus walked along. He saw a man who was born blind from birth. He spit on the ground, made mud with saliva, and smeared the mud on the man's eyes. Jesus said to him, go wash in the pool of Siloam. The word means sent. So the man went away, washed. He returned. He could see. Notice the man doesn't ask to see. Never asked for it. He asks nothing of Jesus. Jesus simply sees him and acts. As a matter of fact, he has no idea what Jesus is doing. As I was reading this morning, I sat there and I'm like going, oh my gosh, wouldn't that be amazing? Like, how would you respond? Like, if we're doing this cleanup day here at the church, and I take some mud, I spit on it, and I rub it on your eyes, and told you to go wash in the Mississippi, which means sent. No, just kidding. I sat there and I thought about it in my head. Wouldn't that make for the strangest SPRC meeting ever? The pastor did what? Why did you do that? I said, well, I wanted him to see. Anyway, the man listens to Jesus, goes and washes off the mud and can see, which causes the response I want you to focus on. The man's neighbors and those who used to see him when he was a beggar said, isn't this the man who used to sit and beg? The man's neighbors, the ones who used to see him every day begging, cannot identify him. The man who has been blind since birth, one whom we must assume never moved far away from home, because later on in the story they go consult his parents. Is this your son? They needed a verification of it. His neighbors cannot recognize him. As I was reading this story this week, I was reminded of how skilled the human mind is at not seeing what we do not want to see. Or we simply get so used to seeing something, we stop noticing it. I served a church in rural Pennsylvania. It was a small town. The town was small, so small. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. I planted him there. Town was so small, it only had two roads running east and west, Front Street and Back Street. That's all there was. And Front Street went right through downtown Higgins and literally ran into the side of our church. I mean, it was directed right to the side of our church. Our church was this classic red brick, two-story church with a big steeple on everything. And the road went right towards the church and snaked around it. There was, every year, somebody literally ran into the church with their car because they lost control or just lost concentration on the road. And it never ceased to amaze me when I was out in town. And I'm talking about a town, maybe 1,000 people, 1,100. Where is your church? It's one of two churches in town, and you almost run into it every day. Where? Right there where you run into the road. That's a church? In that same church, I would visit older members of the congregation in their homes who would show me their police scanner and then give me a breakdown of every police call that happened that last week. And often it was like mature adults tattling on other adults. Well, Pastor, you know what's happening at that house over there, because on the police scanner, this, and this happened, and you don't know what to do with that. You're just like going, oh, okay, I know it happened. That response was always the same, or they always give me that. I was called to that congregation to help clean it up after a very extreme clergy misconduct situation. And when I listened to people who knew every little detail going on in that police scanner, I would ask them, hey, did you hear when the police were called to the parsonage in response to a domestic abuse situation? Response always the same. You know, I missed that one. I don't know how. I didn't hear that one. I found out that was bad. And they weren't lying. Their minds could not handle that, and they just shut it down. So much so that they could not ever remember hearing it. Now, this is an extreme case, but truthfully, we are all like this. We stop seeing things that are not part of our life. We stop seeing things that we cannot handle. And this doesn't mean people are bad. We're just human. And being human has limitations and quirks. I remember when my daughter's life was falling apart, I was the most blind to it. She was my child. She was my little girl. I didn't want to face something I was powerless to stop. So I kind of pretended not to see the things that I saw. In this story, the man born blind is excluded from the life of the community, both socially and religiously. He cannot enter into full life. We know this because all those eyes cannot see him. They could not see him enough to recognize him. He is the one who begs on the side of the road day after day after day since he was a child. But as the argument plays out in the story, where we learn that those with sight are equally blind as well and equally excluded. The funniest thing about this story is a subtle joke that runs through the entire story that we never really think about. We're so busy looking for bigger things, we don't see the humor in stories sometimes. Jesus saw a blind man. He rubbed stuff on his eyes, told him to go wash, and then the man could see. The man born blind keeps getting asked, who did this for him? And literally, he is the only one that never sees Jesus. He never sees him. Jesus tells him to go away and wash. He comes back, and who did this? I don't know. Some guy named Jesus. The Pharisees ask him how, and all he can say, he put mud on my eyes, I washed, and now I see. The Pharisees are students of miracles. They are scholars of the way God acts in the world. And here, God has acted in their presence, and they cannot see it. By their own inability to see or their own inability to be open to the possibility of God acting, they become cut off from God. And that is the sin at work. Sin is not some punishment God inflicts. It's when we choose not to see God at work in our lives. And most often, God is at work in those we cannot see, those we discount from full inclusion. Caroline Lewis, a New Testament scholar from Luther Seminary, pointed out something I'd never considered before. Because the word see and saw is just played over in the story so much. He goes, this story is not just about sight. It's also about hearing as well. The man born blind needs to hear Jesus' instructions. Not just hear them, but believe in what he heard. And those who question refuse to listen to the responses. The story is about seeing and hearing God as active and present in our life, not just then, but now. If we read a line like, who sinned, this man or his parents, it would have thrown our hearing off. But I also left it out for one critical reason. When I left it out, I left out another part of the story that's critical. When they ask that answer to that question, Jesus says this line in verse 5, I am the light of the world. I am the light of the world. Jesus goes public to show, I am the light of the world. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. That is where the story began in the first chapter of John, and he gives you a physical manifestation of what that is. I read the news, and I know on all sides of the political spectrum right now, political, social, and all forms of life, we can all see darkness. We can all see darkness. But can we see the light? Can we see the light of Christ moving and stirring in all creation? Is our hearts and minds open to it? Are we just too trained to see all the darkness that we can't open ourselves to the possibility that light might be working right now? If we see that light, we can see the light stirring it all. If we cannot, maybe we need to have some mud and spit rubbed on our eyes to wake us up and see that the life that comes up with Christ comes from our hearing and seeing him being present in our world. And we have a table out back if you want. I'll find some dirt. I'll rub it on your eyes for that. Otherwise, you can just see and believe and look for Christ working in your eyes. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. I want to see you. Amen.